Hello, welcome to CS101 Introduction to Computer Science. This is class 11 and we'll be talking about both mobile apps and cloud computing today. So first let's talk about mobile app development. So why are we learning about app development for mobile platforms? Obviously you've probably heard about it. You've heard about the smartphone industry. You most likely have a smartphone yourself, and you've heard about the app industry and people developing apps for mobile for various reasons. Well, over the past 7 to 8 years, there's been an explosive growth of mobile devices connecting to the internet. And oftentimes these smartphones or even tablets have the computing power very similar to that of a desktop computer from 7 years ago or 10 years ago. So you can do the same things that you could do on a desktop or laptop computer 7 or 10 years ago on your smartphone or tablet today, which is browse websites, watch video, etc. And the number of mobile devices is quickly surpassing the number of desktop computers out there. So this is a graph that was posted on Business Insider, the media website. So smartphone growth has overtaken desktop growth over the past 7 to 8 years, and the total number of mobile devices today is more than computers. And some countries, especially in Asia and Africa, are completely bypassing the desktop computer revolution and going straight into the mobile age. So there's just a lot more devices out there, and hence a lot more footprint, and you can develop apps that are used by a greater number of users. Before we go into mobile apps, we'll talk a little bit about mobile websites. So there's two ways to build websites that are optimized for a mobile site. So we talked about building websites earlier in this course, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but there's a specific sort of framework you need to use to make sure that your website works well on mobile as well. So there's two ways to do it. One is you build two different versions of your website, one for desktop and one for mobile. Or you can build a responsive website which adapts to the screen size on the user's device. So let's talk about building two versions. So in this case, you have to build two different websites, one for mobile and one for desktop. And if you change one, you have to change the other manually as well. The advantage of this is it's very easy to separate concerns. So you can build your desktop website, you can build your mobile website, and you don't have to worry about whether these will overlap or cause problems for each other. And it's easy to develop these two separately. Responsive websites are slightly different. You build one website that works on all platforms. It's only one template, so you're building one website, and changing that will change both the desktop and the mobile layout. You just need to make sure that when you build your UI changes that they are responsive and will work on both. So in the end of the day, with a responsive website, you're building just one website, but you just need to take care to make sure that the elements and various things flow around well, so that it looks good on both a mobile and desktop websites. And increasingly, a large number of websites are going responsive because it's easier to build just one website that does both. Okay, so if you can develop a mobile website, right, that runs on your mobile platform, smartphone or tablet, why do you need an app, right? So the reason is apps can have way more features than a mobile website can. They're faster to load, they're more optimized to the device, they don't rely on the internet as much, and so if the internet goes down, your device can still run the app, and it's easy to update and things like that. The downside is there's more cost, and it takes longer often to build apps than it takes to develop a website. So if you're building an app, where do you build it on? So first of all, there's two major platforms. We'll talk about the first one, which is Apple's iOS, which runs on iPhone and iPad. So you might have heard about the iPhone and iPad devices, but they run on this operating system called iOS from Apple. And iOS only runs on Apple's hardware. And you develop iOS apps through using a Mac computer and an integrated development environment called Xcode. So Xcode is free from Apple, but it runs only on Mac computers. So Xcode is the default IDE, and again, it's free but runs only on Macs. Here's a screenshot of what it looks like. You can see there's an app being developed on the screen, and this is what it looks like developing a mobile app. You program in a language called Objective-C, which is very similar to C, C++, and hence Java, but much closer to C and C++. And you use Apple's own classes and libraries for, interacting with the device. There is a new programming language that Apple introduced in 2015, so about a couple of years ago, called Swift, which is a newer paradigm, belongs to a newer paradigm of programming languages. And some claim that it's easier, some prefer Objective-C, some prefer Swift, but now you have a choice of languages to develop iOS apps in. The other popular mobile app platform is actually Android. So almost all other mobile devices, whether it be smartphones or laptops today, are powered by Android, an open source operating system from Google. So your PC most likely runs Windows unless you have an Mac, which runs the Apple's operating system. So similar to that, most mobile devices today run Android, Apple's devices, which are the iPhone and iPad, run on iOS. So whether your smartphone or device is from Samsung or LG or Amazon, it's most likely running Android. And Android, you develop Android apps in a free IDE called Android Studio, which is from Google. It's based off another popular IDE called IntelliJ for Java. And you program Android apps in Java. So the programming language is actually Java, and you can use many of the familiar Java libraries for XML, JSON, network connectivity, etc. And some libraries are specific to Android, so for things like interacting with the user interface and hardware acceleration and gaming, etc. You use some of the libraries that come from Google, which are specific to interacting with the Android operating system. So again, here's a screenshot of what it looks like. So building an Android app in Android Studio. There's a few other cross-platform IDEs such as Xamarin and PhoneGap. With Xamarin, what happens is you build an app using C# and similar logic, and it actually builds. You code once, and it actually builds out apps in iOS, Android, and for Windows. PhoneGap is similar. And it used to be called Cordova. You build the app in HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript, which is basically web technologies, and PhoneGap packages these and makes it into an app that runs on Apple's iOS, on Android, and Windows Phone. So you're not limited to what Apple and Google give you to develop apps for the iOS and Android platforms. You can use some of these cross-platform IDEs as well. All right, so we've talked about mobile apps. Let's go into cloud computing. What is cloud computing? It's basically an abstract way of looking at server and software platforms